several key things that really need to be discussed about the NCAA. They all focus back on the main topic that the NCAA really needs to change its entire attitude towards the way they treat student athletes. I'd like to first share a story about one of my friends. He'd like to remain anonymous and the school anonymous also. He played football all his life in high school, middle school, and when he graduated high school, he decided he wanted to play at a higher level. So he decided on his school, and when summer came around, he started playing summer ball. Pretty quickly, he realized that there was a pretty big disparity between walk-ons like himself and the scholarship athletes. The scholarship athletes were treated with a lot more respect, and they were given preferential treatment by just about everyone in the organization. One of the things that the trainers had him doing was riding the bike many hours during the day. And when he was doing this, after a while, he started to notice his knee was hurting. Fought through it a little bit, but eventually got to the point where he couldn't go on the bike at all without his knee hurting. Just excruciating pain. So he went to the trainer and asked him if he could just take a look at it. And the trainer looked at him and said, "You're not on scholarship. I don't give a shit about you. Get back on the bike." Now, this isn't how anyone should be treated, and this is definitely not how someone who is representing your school on the athletic field should be treated. And it's not right at all. The difference between scholarship athletes and non-scholarship athletes in the NCAA, the treatment between the two is huge. This may be an extreme situation, but overall, athletes who are on scholarship are treated way better than kids who are not on scholarship, and this is not right. This, again, goes back to the whole mindset that the NCAA needs to change the way they treat student athletes, and that the whole organization has lost its focus on its mission and is now completely focused on making money. Which leads me to my second point. The NCAA is no longer focused on giving these kids an education. The UNC football team recently came under fire for creating what were basically fake majors and fake classes. Kids rarely had to show up to class in order to pass the class and receive A's, and these classes were made only so that the kids could stay eligible for the football team. Many of these kids have been reportedly graduating with third grade reading levels and come out of the school with basically a worthless piece of paper. The NCAA prides itself on on giving students scholarships, but how are these scholarships doing them any good if they're not learning anything? Your ads often say that 95% of these student athletes are going to go pro in somewhere other than sports. If this is really the case, how are we doing them any favors by giving them a free education that is not going to help them later in their career? My third and final point is that we need to pay these players, or pay these students, in some way. I'm not saying how we should pay them, but they need to start receiving some compensation for the money that they're generating for these schools. Many of these students come from poor backgrounds and have absolutely no spending money. Shabazz Napier for the UConn Huskies. Many people know who he is now because he just led his team to the national championship in men's basketball. Anyone else besides in college athletics who's on a national spotlight like this is going to be making large amounts of money. Yet because he is a college athlete, he receives none of the money that he's making for his school. Recently, it's been reported that he goes to bed hungry many nights because he doesn't have enough money to afford food. And anyone who's on that national spotlight and generating so much money for an organization deserves to be making at least some money, and it's just inexcusable for him to be going to bed without being hungry. And these kids work pretty much full-time jobs for the school. They don't even have time to work on their studies. A lot of them work 30 more hours a week for those big sports like football and basketball. So they can't get a job anywhere else, let alone, like I said before, get their studies done, which is what the point of going to college truly is. On top of that, coaches are making massive amounts of money. It was reported after the Final Four that the University of Florida basketball coaches received a $400,000 bonus for making the Final Four. $400,000. And these students received none of that money. Now, I realize that the coaches are a very important role in a basketball team. However, they're not the ones winning these games. They're not the ones that are getting to the Final Four and generating the money for the school. That's the students, the ones who are playing. They're not receiving any money at all. And it's not quite slave labor, but it's about as close as there is in this country. Just in conclusion, the mindset of this organization needs to change. It's become way too greedy and power hungry and relies on the unpaid labor of thousands of student athletes to make millions for your organization and for schools. These students deserve better, and the way they are treated needs to change. Thank you. I had a lot of artificial enthusiasm. I was really just tired all day. So. But felt kind of nervous at the beginning, and then I just started talking, and it all came back, so I was ready to go once I started.
Good. Okay. Oh, questions. I didn't give you an opportunity. Questions? I know some of you guys have questions.
What's wrong with Friends Date?
He didn't explain what exactly, but he just heard it sometime in high school and re-aggravated